50 for Ajit Agarkar, and that's the quickest by an Indian in one-day internationals. It's come off just 21 balls.
What an amazing innings, unbelievable stroke play.
Hello and welcome to episode 50 of Radio Cricket. Yep, that is 50. 50, also known as half a Sachin or twice a Rohit. Speaking to you live from the land of the Velvet Revolution, I am Nishant Joshi, and I'm joined by the 50th time by the man who was once voted Esquire's most eligible cricket writer. He beat off stiff competition from my old friend Harsha Bhogle. It is James Marsh.
Yes, hello Nishant. Yes, whatever Bhogle. At least I haven't been juicing my follicles. So, Nishant, as you say, it is 50 up for us today. Incredible to think, but you know, we mustn't rest on our laurels here. There's still a lot of work to do, so even as we raise our bats to the crowd, we must maintain a steely look in our eyes as we try to push on for our century. We want to be very much the Bradman of podcasts, who had a 50s to hundreds conversion rate of 69.05, rather than Shane Watson, whose own conversion rate is currently less than the ratio of natural hair colour to peroxide in the present Australian dressing room. So, Nishant, as I shake hands with you, or rather, perhaps in the English way, bump fists in the middle of the pitch, I'd just like to say congratulations and thank you to you for this lovely achievement.
Well, yes, congratulations to you, congratulations to me, and congratulations to our listeners who've braved 50 full episodes. I mean, it is quite a landmark, as you say. And dear listeners, I'd like to tell you, Radio Cricket has now been on the air for 18 whole months. And in that time, we've amassed well over 20,000 subscribers. And combined, you have now listened to a total of 16,320 hours of Radio Cricket goodness, which translates to 2 whole man years. Now, it's a pretty special feeling to be able to say that you've effectively, irreversibly removed 2 entire man years from the universe's time-based economy. I'm pretty sure that's not what Jesus had in mind when he created the universe in 3000 BC. So, dear listeners, first of all, thank you very much for listening to us and keeping us going over the past 50 episodes. It's been a lot of hard work for us. But what makes it worthwhile is the feedback that we get from you guys every week. Every week we get emails and tweets and Facebook messages from all around the world, which are mostly genuinely heartwarming and occasionally quite disturbing. Much like James's ancestors, we've also built an empire around the world, although unlike his ancestors, we're actually giving money to Africa, and we've probably also covered more countries. Radio Cricket is now listened to in countries such as Bhutan, Singapore, Pakistan, Brazil, Sweden, Canada, Egypt, Mongolia, and I can't quite read this one. There's Indie. No, it must be a typo. I think someone's misspelled Indonesia there. So, listeners, do please keep sending in your emails to home@alternativecricket.com. We do make sure to read every single message. And just on that note, I know James is getting quite embarrassed by the amount of ladies' underwear that he's been getting in the post. He is quite bashful about it, but quite a lot of our fan mail goes towards James and his sexy voice, as you could imagine. I mean, every day I open our email account and I see that James has a new female fan who just lusts after his voice. And a little fun factoid for you, dear listeners: one of our listeners loved James's voice so much that she personally requested it. She personally requested him to record a voice alarm clock for her. And to be honest, who could blame this kind lady for wanting to wake up with James whispering pillow talk in her ear every morning?
Well, thank you, Nishant. That's awfully kind. But I would just like to say, in all seriousness, if there are any other girls out there who'd like me to read from Ravi Shastri's ever-popular autobiography, ladies, are you ready? Then, for the right price, I'll be more than happy to.
Cricket enthusiast in no way affiliated to the Chennai Super Kings news now, and well, James, after 76 short matches, the IPL has finally come to a tragically short end, with Mumbai Indians, of course, lifting the trophy in Kolkata. But really, perhaps sadly, or perhaps fittingly, the cricket was secondary to off-field events this year. And just for those of you who have been in a cricket-induced coma in the past week, here is a recap of what's happened. First of all, the Rajasthan Royals trio of Srisanth, Ajit Chandila and Ankit Chawan were arrested on suspicion of spot fixing. Then small-time Bollywood actor and former Big Boss winner Vindu Dara Singh was taken into custody for betting-related offences, which was really interesting because he'd been at several Chennai matches this year, sitting next to none other than Sakshi Dhoni, who is intimately involved with MS Dhoni, we are led to believe. But in this world of Chennai Super Kings, we're not really sure who's affiliated with who these days. Following on from that, the Chennai Super Kings not team owner Gurunath Meiyappan was arrested on betting-related charges. Then BCCI President N. Srinivasan resisted calls to resign from his post. Then Asad Rauf mysteriously disappeared from the IPL and the roster of umpires for the Champions Trophy, which weirdly nobody has mentioned at all. Then, equally weirdly, Danny Morrison also mysteriously disappeared from the IPL after referring to Virat Kohli as the future Indian captain. Oh, and I think that's it. No, wait. The entire Pune Warriors franchise also disappeared. That's a team valued at $370 million, just vanished into thin air. And I think that's about it. Yeah, that's about it. Oh no, also, this was the week where cricketing legend and four-time winner of Mumbai's coveted Most Pinchable Cheeks award, Sachin Tendulkar, retired from all cricket. Well, it's only IPL cricket, but still. So, James, I'm not really sure where to start here, but I'd suggest that, the shit has really hit the fan when Sachin Tendulkar retires, and frankly, it seems to have registered with the good people of India even less than the anti-corruption unit's campaign against spot fixing has done with Indian cricketers.
Well, yeah, it's interesting you mention Sachin, because obviously there were clouds darker than the bags under Asad Rauf's eyes hanging over the IPL final, so it was rather hard to watch it as a cricketing spectacle. But during it, there was a lovely interview with Sachin, and I'm not going to do a Sachin impression because A, I don't want dog excrement posted through my letterbox, and B, I haven't got any helium handy. But it was absolutely lovely to see him interviewed. He was reeling off all these stats about first innings totals at Kolkata, where the final was being played, and he just looked as giddy as a schoolboy who'd won a competition to sit in the dugout. And
I believe we can refer to him as the honorary Vodafone superfan of the day.
Oh God, please don't. I mean, you could go too far with satirical Sachin abuse, Nishant. And he was asked about retirement, and he came up with this lovely phrase. He asked a rhetorical question. He said, "Why should the enthusiasm die?" And I thought that was absolutely lovely. He did then actually retire, as you say, about 20 minutes later, but nevertheless...
Sachin's enthusiasm died pretty quickly as Chennai's innings faded.
Well, possibly it did, but anyway, on the cricketing side of things, it was Mumbai's first win in their second appearance in the final, and it was quite nice to see them finally get to fourth base after so many years of receiving disappointing handjobs around the back of the IPL bike sheds, as it were. And even though we had Rohit Sharma with 3 failures in 3 high-pressure matches during the playoff stages, perhaps getting himself back in the groove for his return to the India side, it was still quite nice to see him win, because he has performed very well both as a batsman and captain throughout the whole tournament. So just firstly, Nishant, before we come to the other dubious aspects of things, what was your take on Mumbai winning the tournament from a cricketing perspective?
Well, yes, James, at the 6th time of asking, Mumbai Indians finally won the IPL. This after having won the Champions League T20 a couple of years ago as well. And, I mean, it has been somewhat of a fairy tale story for Mumbai. That is, of course, if your fairy tales include a billionaire tycoon spending millions and millions of dollars on overplayed players.
One for Disney.
Yeah. Yep, that's a Little Mermaid in the making right there, James. And it's been somewhat of an odd year for Mumbai, because, I mean, if you look at the way they started out with Pondulkar, Ricky Ponting and Sachin Tendulkar as their opening partnership, I think Ricky Ponting must go down as one of the worst IPL auction buys in history. And it's just remarkable that Mumbai actually managed to recover from such a strategic howler to start off their campaign. So they got rid of Ricky Ponting after 6 matches, and then they started to go with Dwayne Smith, who was kind of inconsistent, and he played some strange innings, some uncharacteristic innings. But then ultimately he did come good in a couple of key matches, although he did have a couple of failures in the last couple of matches. But yeah, I think Mumbai's success has definitely been built on their bowling this year, with Mitchell Johnson and Lasith Malinga forming a very, very potent pace attack. And Lasith Malinga, he came really, really good in the final. He really was one of those clutch bowlers, and Mitchell Johnson, it's good to see him back to somewhere near his best and ready and roaring to go with the ICC Champions Trophy coming up soon. So yeah, congratulations to Mumbai. Even though their strategy was quite flaky at times, I think that having the backbone of their side with their best players as their bowlers and no real weak link as a fifth bowler really paid off, especially you could see when defending a low score in a final. It's a mantra that I've been saying for a long time now, that bowlers win you matches, and I think in T20 the focus has always been on buying the most expensive batsmen, but perhaps in next year's auction people will be looking more towards the wicket-taking bowlers. This year you've seen what an impact the bowlers like Lasith Malinga, Mitchell Johnson, James Faulkner have been having. So yeah, I think Mumbai, on reflection, probably deserved to win this IPL, and fair play to them for coming good when it mattered.
But Nishant, regretfully but inevitably having to turn back to the rather shady off-the-field matters you alluded to there. Of course, this week we've had BCCI President N. Srinivasan facing up to the nation's media. He held a press conference on Sunday where he was sort of sat there like a big slab of ghee, only he just basically tried to face down the press, which I think he did relatively successfully, however illogical and ludicrous he looked at times. But however, the thing that's interesting for me which come out of this is that he's announced there's going to be a panel to investigate the involvement of his son-in-law Gurunath Meiyappan with the Chennai Super Kings. And for me, I think that this really had to be a sort of completely independent panel to look into this, given the fact that Srinivasan straddles both the BCCI and CSK. But instead we've got names such as Ravi Shastri being thrown up. Another name mooted is also Rajiv Shukla, the IPL chairman. So for me it just seems completely ridiculous. Why isn't this completely independent? It's like asking some lions to investigate the killing of a zebra and then wondering why they decide that in the end it was the zebra's fault for looking just too damn tasty. So Nishant, I don't know what you've made of these latest developments in the fixing scandal.
It's all about this panel for me. It's been, I mean, last week it was kind of eerily prescient that we mentioned it on Twitter that Ravi Shastri would be the perfect man to head this sort of panel, and the first name confirmed for the panel was none other than Ravi Shastri. So it's been just one of those almost Twilight Zone weeks in cricket where, I mean, you literally couldn't really make it up. And to me, I would actually disagree with you a bit there, James, because I would say that the composition of the panel is perhaps a bit biased against Gurunath Meiyappan. I mean, with all that the poor guy's gone through, why not have Gurunath on the panel itself? I think that would be the most fair and objective way to go about it, because especially afterwards, I'm sure you could edit out that he was even there in the first place.
Well, indeed. Well, I'm sure he probably would distance himself from the inquiry's findings, were he actually sitting on it. But anyway, just the other interesting thing for me is the reaction of Indian fans to the whole business. And I think although the BCCI and Srinivasan are starting to look more ridiculous than Ravi Jadeja's new moustache, as a trained scientist, Nishant, as you know, I always like to use Twitter as an accurate barometer for everything. But it does seem to me that amongst supporters in India, there is now a growing sense of anger and indeed perhaps shame at this whole business. I think it's fair to say that when it comes to defending their nation's cricket, Indian fans, much like Spartacus, do stand up quicker than a man who's just sat down on a hedgehog. But I think the tide has turned. During the May versus Shiva Ramakrishnan episode, there were a fair few India fans, not all of them paid mouthpieces, not mentioning any names, who were prepared to defend the BCCI. But I think now it seems that even that sort of goodwill has gone. So Nishant, I don't know what your view is of the general attitude among India fans is now to the whole scandal.
Yeah, well, James, I do agree that the tide is slightly turning a bit, because it's a pure shamelessness. I mean, people could maybe just about stomach it with perhaps the paid BCCI commentators constantly feeding us propaganda. I mean, Ravi Shastri is basically the modern day equivalent of Goebbels, and it is kind of ridiculous because, I mean, you look at the way that these guys have been treating the fans, and you look at perhaps the way that someone like Srinivasan has actually risen through the ranks to become BCCI chairman, and it's all kind of insidious. It's kind of like there are like lots of sinister ulterior motives involved in all of it, and throughout all of it we've been constantly told that Srinivasan is a cricket fan. Well, you're chairman of the bloody BCCI. If you're not a cricket fan, then what on earth are you doing there? It's utterly depressing, to be honest, and the reaction that I seem to be getting from India fans is that it seems to be a depressing knowingness of the fact that this is a reflection of India's society as a whole right now, that there are plenty of corrupt practices going on, but the people as a whole just feel powerless to kind of stop it. We can protest all we like, and we can raise as much as a fuss as we like, but at the end of the day, if Srinivasan goes into a press conference, as he did the other day, to defend himself and say that he wouldn't resign, he wouldn't be bulldozed into resigning from the BCCI, and all the journalists had to say was, "But sir, why are you not resigning?" And that was the only question they could keep parroting at him. Then I think it reflects poorly on the Indian journalists' ability to actually ask scything questions when they're effectively in the pocket of all of these powerful men.
Well, indeed, Nishant, and I think that despite a few highs, such as the bowling of young Mohit Sharma, the beautiful chubby renaissance of Amit Mishra, and the superlative slower balls of James Faulkner, I think this IPL tournament will be remembered more for the lows than the highs, and I think chief among those has been the standard of umpiring, which has been incredibly poor. And I think particularly Asad Rauf's umpiring has been a fairly constant source of mystery, and of course now he has been pulled from the ICC Champions Trophy coming up in June. I think he's someone whose reputation might actually be enhanced by allegations of corruption because it would at least explain some of his decisions. And of course, chief among these was the full toss in the Mumbai versus Kings 11 Punjab, which wasn't signalled, allowing the eventual champions to win that match. And it was a ball which could probably only have been considered under waist height if a giraffe had been facing Kulkarni's last over. His agent has vowed to clear his name, and for me that raises the question, why on earth do umpires need agents, and who regulates these people? I'm sure the ICC don't, and it just seems another layer of potential corruption fodder for the nefarious parasites surrounding cricket to get their teeth into. One other interesting thing, after he was pulled from the Champions Trophy, Malcolm Conn, the Australian journalist and professional pommy baiter, tweeted that having seen suspended Asad Rauf in action on and off the field, I'd like to hear his answers to any police questioning. Now, we all know what sort of action Asad Rauf gets up to off the pitch, so Malcolm, if you're listening, if you've got any photos, please, 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 just keep them to yourself. But Nishant, we shouldn't, of course, be Bob Willis commenting on Jonathan Trott and just relentlessly focus on the negatives. And as I say, chief among the highlights for me was the performance of James Faulkner. He took the second highest number of wickets in the tournament. He got 28. He got 2 fifers, the only player to do so in the tournament, and his death bowling was often the final nail in the coffin of a lot of teams. His back of the hand slower ball was more difficult to read than a transcription of a Saeed Ajmal post-match interview where he tries to explain quantum mechanics. And I think amidst all the squalor of this year's IPL, he has really been one of the shining lights. And just referring back to Ponting's purchase earlier on, he was picked up for $400,000 at the auction, which obviously is not a snip, but does look like incredibly good value. So Nishant, he was the highlight of the tournament for me, perhaps along with Rahana's batting. But for you, what have been your standout performances?
Well, I think that everyone enjoyed seeing Rahul Dravid enjoy some sort of final renaissance before it's widely assumed that he's going to retire once and for all. And I mean, Rahul Dravid really did add some class to the tournament. He added some dignity to it, along with Paddy Upton. I think they did a fantastic job of kind of rolling with the spot fixing tide there. And I mean, it is a shame that Rahul Dravid's last act in professional cricket, if you can call the IPL professional cricket, would be to effectively bow out on a slightly sour note. But I mean, the IPL has had plenty of standout moments. The fielding started out incredibly well. I think Gurkirat Singh's catch off Ross Taylor in an early match for Kings 11 Punjab, when he dived full length to his right to a ball which is going a million miles an hour at fine leg. I've never seen such a catch in my life, and I think really that was probably one of the moments in the tournament where my jaw literally dropped. And I think the fielding in this IPL has been exceptional on the whole, although the Sunrisers still did struggle to cope with the ghost of the Deccan Chargers with their numerous dropped catches under lights. But I mean, the highlight for me has been slightly off the field, as you'd say, James. I mean, during the IPL final, I think there were a couple of standout moments for me, especially when a lot of commentators kind of euphemistically said that it's been a tough week for the IPL, which is a bit like the captain saying it's been a tough few hours on the Titanic. And also at the IPL final, Srinivasan awarding Chennai Super Kings the Fair Play Award. It was a bit like Kim Jong-il handing himself the Nobel Peace Prize. And I mean, these are the sorts of moments that make the IPL, James. I mean, we do give it a tough rap, but at the end of the day, these are the sort of deliciously ironic moments which we kind of revel in. And I mean, there is some lovely symmetry to the IPL, and some perhaps would call it fate even, as others might call it cricketing karma. I say this because the IPL was born in Sreesanth's hands, because when he took that winning catch at short fine leg in the 2007 World T20 final, that's when the IPL really started in earnest. And in this IPL, it was started off by Sri Lankan players being, of course, infamously barred from playing in Chennai, and it ended with Lasith Malinga, a Sri Lankan bowler, having his revenge on Chennai. Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of Radio Cricket. Thank you once again for joining us for our 50th edition of Radio Cricket. We did reach 50 slower than Jacques Kallis, but just like him, I hope that we did it stylishly and in perennially underrated fashion. So, IPL is over. I do feel a bit like a soldier returning home from war, but if there is one thing that can cure the IPL, it is actual cricket, and we've got plenty of that coming up with the ICC Champions Trophy. So, dear listeners, thanks very much for joining us throughout the IPL, and throughout our 50 episodes. Do remember you can listen to us on soundcloud.com/Radio Cricket, youtube.com/alt cricket, and on iTunes just search for Radio Cricket. Listeners, every time you write a good review or give a rating for Radio Cricket on iTunes, a dog takes a dump on Srinivasan's front lawn. Well, that's all from me for another week. I've been Nishant Joshi.
And I've been James Marsh. And for all proper cricket fans out there, can I just remind you that it is only another 301 days until the start of IPL 7. Goodbye!
I think it was a very poor performance. One of the worst things I have ever seen done on a cricket field. Good night.